I'm Jerry Medlin, the mayor of Benson, North Carolina. We've had a great weekend recognizing Jimmy Capps and all the accomplishments that he's made since he's been in Nashville and everywhere else in the world playing the guitar. He, by the way, is the #1 guitar player in the world. And the people in Benson recognize that, and it was talked about a number of times this week. We want to introduce some people that's going to have a cross conversation with Jimmy. Senator Charlie Albertson, Clyde Mattocks, Billy Yergin, and of course Jimmy. And we look forward to this conversation and recording some of the things that Jimmy has done and what he plans to do.
You just heard Mayor Jerry Medlin, the Mayor of Benson, North Carolina, introduce Jimmy Capps and talk about the brief of what went on here on May the 9th and 10th and the 11th of 2019. And you would have had to be here to really understand the warmth and the collective gathering on Jimmy's behalf. And one particular thing that I saw that I touched my heart was there was someone who wanted to be a part of welcoming Jimmy, and they put out a 10-inch by 12-inch or 20-inch sign that says in handwriting, "Welcome home, Jimmy." And I thought that was really good. That just kind of touched me. We're talking about life of James Dixon Capps, known as probably the greatest guitar player of our time, and our time being of the 20th century. And we have Jimmy today to talk a bit about his life, his experiences, the things that have made him who he is, what has driven him to be who he is, and especially we want to start off by his background. And with that in mind, Jimmy, talk a bit about your earliest recollections, even before guitar playing. What brought you into playing guitar? What made you love it, and what drove you to excel to the level you are now?
Well, on a funny note, I thought the guitar player always got the girl. So I wanted to play guitar so I might be more popular with the girls, but I'm not sure it worked. But when I grew up, I finally figured out something different to do. But no, I just loved music all my life, even as a kiddo. My dad and me would sit in this room right here, the living room of this house, and listen to the Opry. He was a Bill Monroe fan. He was a real big Bill Monroe fan, and Roy Acuff. I wanted to hear Grady Martin and Red Foley and those guys that would electric instruments, and I later in life grew to gain a lot of respect for Mr. Acuff and Mr. Monroe for what they had done and what they had accomplished, for sure. But I would listen to that music on Saturday night with my dad.
How old were you then, Jimmy?
I probably was maybe 8 years old.
Late
9.
40s.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I grew to love that kind of music, and the sound of a guitar just was the prettiest thing I thought I'd ever heard, music-wise. And actually, a guy that was a hometown hero of mine, Hayden Ivey, he told me one day, he said, "You need to get up in the morning and tune into WSM." He said, "You can only get the station for about maybe an hour, early in the morning, like 6 o'clock, so you can get it from 6 to 7. So there's a group on there called the Carter Sisters and Mother Maybelle, and they've got a guitar player, and his name is Chet Atkins. And he said, you need to get up and listen to him. Said he's the best I've ever heard. Talk about #1 guitar players. He was #1 and still is #1. But I did get up, and every morning after that the weather would let me pull in WSM in Benson. I would get up and listen to the Carter family and Mother Maybelle and Chet. And he was just the best, and still was up until he got real sick, you know, and he could just play anything.
How much influence did Hayden Ivey have on you, other than suggesting that you tune in and listen to these shows?
I remember distinctly him showing me a diminished chord run, and boy, that was unheard of in country music. You didn't dare play a diminish, you know. Somebody said that Lester Flatt had a song called "Finish in a Diminish and You're Through." You're fired. But anyhow, Hayden taught me little things like that, and I still use that scale today that he taught me. You know, he played excellent, and believe it or not, he was the garbage man for Benson. He picked up the garbage at every one of these houses, and then I think the population was about 1,200. He picked up the garbage 2 times a week by himself, and it was a dump truck, garbage truck, and people would have as their garbage cans oil drums that they had cut the top off or taken the top off. They put their garbage. He had to lift that over that dump truck, dump it into the dump truck. And he looked like Charles Atlas, mainly because of lifting all those garbage cans. But he picked up the garbage twice a week in this town, and at no cost to the citizens. The city paid his salary, you know. And but anyhow, he was working with a guy named Jim Thornton then, and they did a radio show on WCKB, and we did it at the First Citizens, I think it's First Citizens Bank on Main Street. They had a little studio up there. I think it was on the 2nd or 3rd floor, maybe the 2nd floor, I can't remember. But we did a remote to WCKB, and Carl Lamb, who later went to WMPM over in Smithfield and bought that station, and then he actually bought another station over there. He was the announcer on it. And then later on, a guy named Al Compton with WCKB was the announcer. But I don't know how it happened exactly, but his name was James Thornton. They called him James Thornton then, not Jim. That happened later on, but he and Hayden allowed me to come up, and I had a little Gibson guitar, and back then I thought I wanted to be a singer and a guitar player, you know. So they would let me come up in the mornings, and the afternoons after school, they had another radio show at 4:30, and I would do one song on each show, singing. And later on, Hayden and I got to where we were playing twin guitars, is what we called it, you know. And he would teach me the lead part, and then he'd play the harmony part. So he influenced me in every aspect of progressing with music, you know.
How old were you, Jimmy, when you first started playing guitar?
Well, I got my guitar.
When you really got into playing guitar and you were comfortable?
Well, to show you how ignorant I was to music, I didn't know how to tune a guitar. I couldn't figure that out. My dad sent off and got a guitar book, you know, and it kind of taught you how to tune a guitar. But before that, my uncle Lynn Cook, who lived with my grandmother next door over here, my grandmother and my aunt, he lived over there with my mother's sister, and he worked at Maggie Tartt's grocery store over in 4 Oaks, cut meat over there. And when he would get home about 6 o'clock in the afternoon, I'd take my guitar over, and he'd tune it for me. Well, I'd come back home and practice. Next morning, I'd get up and practice, and my tuning would last until he got home again the next day, and he would tune it again. But finally, I got to where I could tune it pretty good, you know.
Yeah. Did you ever remember Wayne Rainey and Lonnie Glosson.
Lord,
and
yes.
they sold guitars for $2 and
And
lessons
harmonicas.
and harmonicas and
Yes,
stuff
sir.
like that.
And they were on WCKY
In Cincinnati,
Ohio.
Cincinnati 1, Ohio.
Yeah, Cincinnati 1,
Yeah.
Ohio. Nelson King.
Yeah, Nelson King, right.
And another guy named,
Supper Time Frolic.
I didn't know about that, but there was another announcer up there too, Marty Roberts.
Roberts,
Yeah.
not Robbins, but Roberts. Yeah.
And he and Nelson King had that shift
Yeah.
of nighttime and maybe early morning.
And you could pick up WCKY in
Oh,
Cincinnati,
man. Like a local
JJD
station.
in Chicago, and some of those stations played country music late at night.
absolutely.
Jimmy, how did, as a young boy, how did you make you made your side money in and around town here? Talk about that.
You mean like regular money?
Yeah.
Well, I went to, God, what was the guy's name?
Peanut Langdon.
Well, Peanut Langdon was one of them I worked for in a grocery store, but before him, the guy had a place called City Market, and I delivered groceries for him. Mr. Barber was his name, Alonzo Barber, and I was best friends with one of his sons. They lived over on Main Street, and had a big fine brick home over there. And they were rich, parallel to us. My folks, Daddy just made a living,
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
But anyhow, I delivered groceries for Mr. Barber, and
On a bicycle.
on a bicycle with a basket on it. And it always scared me to. Back then, people would order by phone. People that didn't want to come to the store, and we'd deliver, And they would want 5 gallons of kerosene and groceries, but you had to be careful delivering those groceries with that 5 gallons of kerosene, not to spill any on the groceries. So I would take a potato and stick it on the end of the where you poured the kerosene out.
Keep it from spilling out.
Keep it from spilling out.
Yeah. Reason I bring it up, somebody was telling me that you delivered groceries for Peanut Langdon's daddy, or Peanut, right down at the corner on Main Street.
Yeah, next to the jewelry store.
Yeah,
there.
right. Yeah,
I think Edgar Johnson.
Right.
Mr. Edgar Johnson.
Yeah.
Mr. Edgar
Yeah,
Johnson.
Mr. Edgar Johnson. Yeah. What about after Jim Thornton? Surely you played with others.
I did. I ran into a great steel guitar player, and I think I'm remembering correctly that he was working a drive-in theater, but I can't remember the town. It was north of Raleigh, and I went out to see him playing with another band, and it was Clyde Mattocks, and I think he was home from his then current job that he was working in Florence, South Carolina, with a guy named Slim Mims and the Dream Ranch Boys. And he said that he told me, he said, well, Slim's talking about hiring a guitar player. I said, would you want that job? And I said, well, yeah. He said, well, it pays, I think Clyde was making 65 a week, and he offered me 55. So, but anyhow, I'd never had a salary job. I was working for Jim for like $15 a night, and nothing guaranteed, you know. So, boy, I thought, man, yeah,
You big time.
55. But I was only, I think I was just over 16 years old, and maybe 17.
Now this is 1956 you're talking about.
I think it was.
55 or 6.
Clyde can be more.
Yeah.
He probably remembers better than me. But anyhow, I told him, I said, yeah, but I said, I got to talk to my dad, you know. I'm still in school. And so anyhow, I talked to my dad, and I had already talked to the principal. He had called me in and gave me the statement that he probably never gave anyone else, but he gave me the choice. He said, you really don't like school, do you? And I said, it was W.J. Barefoot, I'll never forget. And I said, no, sir. He said, you'd rather be playing music, wouldn't you? And I said, yeah. He said, well, your teachers tell me that you come in and you go to sleep. You'll fall asleep on your desk. And I said, well, when you play them late dances, you're sleepy the next day. And he said, well, I understand. He said, well, maybe you ought to hang up school. He didn't say it like that, but he said, maybe quitting school would be good and you can pursue what you love, you know. And he said, but you got to talk to your dad about it. And at that time, I had a chance to go with Clyde and Slim Mims in Florence. So I sat right here on this porch, 2 rocking chairs, and I asked my dad if I could quit school, and he didn't want me to, but he said, I know what you love, and I said, well, there's another thing. I want to move to South Carolina. Can you imagine a 17-year-old kid telling his dad he wants to move away, you know? And he said, I can't okay that. I said, well, Daddy, I really think this is a chance to make some good money, you know, and do what I love. And I said, this is a great band down there. And he said, I just can't approve of that, you know. And he went and talked to a friend of his that worked at Medlin and Dorman. His name was Ray Holmes. And he and my dad were just the best of friends. And my dad told him the situation. And Mr. Ray said, well, Tommy said, I think I'd let the boy go. That's the way he put it to it. And Daddy said, you really believe like that? And he said, yeah. He said, that's what he loves. You know, he loves music. Said, let him prove it wrong, you know. And so Daddy came back to me and told me he had talked to his best friend and that he thought it would be wise if Daddy said yes. So he said, I'm okay, and you're moving to South Carolina. So I did. Clyde got me the job, and I left home. And I guess we were down there probably a year and a half. And we played a place, it was like a hangar for airplanes, but it was called the Dream Ranch Barn. It was like a big old metal building, you know. And we had a square dance in there every Saturday night, and they would pack the place. I mean, Clyde can probably tell you how many people it would hold, you know, and then we would have wrestling matches on Wednesday night. And then the rest of the week, Slim would burn up the road with us, you know, in his Cadillac. We'd load up and go play schools and supermarket openings and everything that he could book.
You know what?
What?
I got one of the grooviest guitar players in the world in Nashville and everybody else.
Oh?
Jimmy Capps. Come on over here, Jimmy, and pick this with me. I'm going to show him up, though.
Oh, all right. Ladies and gentlemen, make welcome Ronnie Snowman, will you please?
we were talking about doing the dance in Wallace, North Carolina, and Charlie was the lead singer and kind of handled the dance. He probably booked it, and then Clyde played steel guitar over there. Well, I was the excess baggage. They were kind enough to let me work and make a little money for gas money, you know. But it was J.C. Bryan on bass.
Played the
Who
bass.
played the fiddle?
Leonard Brinkley.
Yeah.
Yep.
Good guys,
Yeah,
man.
they were pretty.
And later on, didn't we have drums?
Yeah,
We had
Tom.
drums, had
Tom.
Jimmy Williams played with us for a while.
That's right. Yeah.
Jimmy Williams.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
right.
Yeah. It was, but those were good times. They
Tom
were-
Bonham was the guy that played the drums, and then after that, Jerry come in and played.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They did, sure they did.
Yeah.
Good time. Wow.
So y'all played more local and the regional areas. And what era is this? Is this 55 and 6?
No, it was more like, for me, it was more like 57 and part of 58. And I then went to work for Bill Joe Austin. They added guitar.
Yeah.
And I didn't work Wallace then. You know.
I think the first time I recall meeting Jimmy Clyde was when we did the Slim Short show. I think we played a dance or two before.
Yeah.
And as I recall, that was probably 53 or 4 or 5, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
I remember you coming to the house. We were working on a house one time. Grace and I was trying to build a house.
Yeah.
We had these metal windows we put in it.
Yeah.
And Clyde came down. He knew how to put the putty around the window. You didn't know how to do anything. Right?
Cheap labor.
Oh, I didn't know how to do that. Nothing.
But it was a good time. I'm
Jimmy
telling
was the
you.
water boy.
Yeah. I
It was
should have
a good
been.
time.
I should have been. These two guys right here, man, they're some of the dearest friends, man. And Charlie and I have hung together more than Clyde. Clyde's been a busy man. He had a group called the Super Grit.
Super great cowboy, man.
I mean, he was booking them and playing everything, banjo and guitar and steel, and I mean, it was a popular band in Carolina.
Yeah.
So we were kind of separated, but Charlie and I have been doing things for, gosh,
Yeah, a long
20 or
time.
30 years.
All my records, except the first 1 or 2 things I recorded, Jimmy has produced it, and like you said, we become closer over the years.
Yeah.
Became
Yeah.
one of the best friends, and of course, anytime I go to Nashville, I always put up with Jimmy, and he puts me up, and we have a great time.
I'm the cheapest motel he can find. But these are good people, solid guys.
When did that point come, Jimmy? When you knew that you were going to make a career, a lifelong career out of playing guitar?
Well, you know how it is as a teenager. You know, I was 17 when I worked with Slim, and then also when I worked with Slim Short. But you know, you believe you're invisible and bulletproof. You know, this is going to go on forever. You know, but when I really think that it hit me that, man, I can make a living at this. You know, I was here at home, and my aunt, who lived next door with my grandmother, she come running over here. We didn't have a telephone, and these guys have heard this story, so it'll probably be boring to them, but maybe
Well,
not
I'll take
to
a
the
nap
phone.
now.
It's nap time. Anyhow, my aunt came running over here that afternoon and said, Jimmy, said, Slim Short's on the phone, and he needs to talk to you. So I went over to my grandmother's phone, and he said, Jimmy, he said, Charlie Lubin just called me, and said Paul Yandel recommended you to replace their guitar player who had gotten drafted, Paul Yandel. And I said, wow, man, it had always been my dream to work with someone like the Lubins, because
And they, at this point, they had gained their notoriety.
oh yeah, they actually played the Dream Ranch Barn.
You know, singing groups come and singing groups go, but there's a duo that shows signs of going on forever. Ladies and gentlemen, Ira and Charlie, the Lubin brothers.
Thank you, T-Tom. Thank you very much. We're
What do you
mighty proud to be here, and we're all having a good time.
Thank you.
And
what are you fellows going to sing for us?
Well, we got a little old song that ain't been released too long on Capitol, and we'd like to sing it for all the folks today.
All
Hope
right.
they'll enjoy it. Entitled "It Hurt Me More the Second Time Around." at once.
Slim said, well, Charlie Lubin's going to call you tomorrow and ask you if you want to audition for the job. So he, just like his word, he called my aunt, came over and said, Charlie Lubin's on the phone, he wants to talk to you. So I went over and answered the phone, and he said, we'd like to have you come to work with us, we think, but we want you to audition. So I said, well, okay, I'll be glad to. How do I do that? And he said, we're playing Burlington, North Carolina next week at a theater over there. And he said, would you mind driving up and auditioning with us? Well, I had been working with Slim Short, and Tommy Hagen and Buck Jones were part of that band.
Buck and Tommy.
And they sang every Lubin Brothers song you could think of in the same key. I knew the turnarounds and the intros and the fills, and it was from listening to Paul Yandel and Chet Atkins. And so I went up and lugged a Fender amp and a Gretsch guitar up to their rooms in that hotel in Burlington, and Charlie had his guitar and Ira had his mandolin, and they started singing some songs. Well, it came easy because I knew those turnarounds and intros, you know. And Paul, I noticed, was kind of turning his back to me, and it looked like he wasn't happy with me, you know. And we later on became the best of friends. But he came up to me and he said, Jimmy, he said, won't you play us an instrumental? And I said, okay, Paul, what do you want to hear? And he said, how about Malaguena? And I said, Paul, I'll be honest with you, I never did learn Malaguena. And Charlie Lubin made the classic statement. He said, Paul said, me and Ari, he called him Ari.
Yeah.
Ari.
Yeah. He said, we hardly ever sang Malaguena anymore, and we're going to hire him.
Really, that's when they hired him, and we cried again.
Yeah, yeah.
I can vouch that story. Later on, I did some demos with Charlie. He was in with a fellow named Randy Stalls up in Williamson. They were writing and publishing some gospel stuff, and he called me up and said, come on up, I got a Charlie Lubin session, we're going to demo some gospel songs. So I went up and talked with Charlie, and he knew me from hanging around the Lubins and with Jimmy, and he retold that story at the studio that day. Yeah, almost just word for word.
Job with them was at the Flame Club in Minneapolis. We did a sit-down job there and played 4 nights. And if you can imagine the Lubins in a club, I mean, them people, they had a fan base, and their fan base would support them. But most of the people that came in that club, they were there to drink and have a good time and dance.
Yeah.
Well, you can't dance to I Don't Believe You Met My Baby, or When I Stopped. You might could dance to When I Stopped Dreaming.
You
Anyhow,
could waltz to that probably.
It would make Ira mad, you know, because they wouldn't listen.
Because he would die.
They would not listen, you know. They wanted to drink, but they had this few fans that would come almost every night.
Yeah.
And they would still book us back, you know.
Excuse me, I don't know if anybody else has talked about this or not. Of course, we all know how great a guitar player Jimmy is, but I think one of the things that's led to his great success, as well as his ability to play music, is his ability to connect and work with people. And if you've read that book, The Man in Back,
Yeah.
and if you haven't read it, you need to.
I've read it front to back.
It's a great testimony, I think, to the people who he has worked with, who can speak so kindly to him.
Absolutely.
And I admire that about Jimmy as much as anything.
Thank you,
I
Charlie.
You know,
Thank you.
Charlie, Kenny Rogers last night made a wonderful statement in that regard, that he had played behind or had orchestras behind him, but nobody could do it like Jimmy. Essentially, that's what he said. Why else do you say that, Charlie?
Well, I've come to know him so well over these years, spending a lot of time with him. Jimmy and my daughter, I think she recognized that Jimmy and I, we can get right down, you know, talk about things, personal things, and we can share those things. And I've come to know him as a humble, kind individual who loves people. His mother was a great lady, and he reminded me so much of his mother. Just a wonderful person. And you can't help but love Jimmy Cap if you know him.
Well, his nature, that nature shows at first glance.
Yeah.
And so, but I wanted you to expound on it, Charlie. Clyde. What do you say?
Where did we leave off now? They dropped me in the middle of the flame. I'm still in the middle of the Flame Club in Minneapolis. I'm thinking, where's this going?
I had a question. I've thought about it, and in fact, I've had a couple of people ask me, you know, in recent years, at what what year if you remember when you quit working the road and just did studio work and stayed off the road?
1967.
67.
It was when I was doing the Eddie Hill show. Another fellow guitar player named Pete Wade. If people don't know who he is, man, he's one of the greatest session players and live players. He worked with Ray Price for years, but he was doing that early morning TV show. Well, his session work got so plentiful that he was calling me to sub for him, and finally he just called me one day and he said, "You want that TV show?" And I said, "Oh man, do I ever!" It paid like $175 a week, and I knew that would give me a base salary.
What year was this?
It was 1966.
So it's 350 by today's standards.
By today's standards, yeah. So I said, "You bet I do, Pete." And I knew I could work some spots on the Opry too, you know, because I'd been working with Charlie and all the artists that I worked with down there. Anyhow, I took the job, and Lightning Chance was running a publishing company then, and he started using me on demo sessions, which would be, we'd cut them for publishing companies to pitch their songs, you know, and he started using me on demo sessions, and it later on graduated to master sessions, and that's how I got into studio work. And
that was in 67, you said.
Yeah, it started in 67, and I had been recording with the Lubins and Furlan. You know, I did their records, but it boiled down to where I was kind of becoming more of an acoustic rhythm player than I was a lead player, you know, so it was all about making a better record, you know, so whatever they wanted me to do, I would do. I mean, even if it was go get hamburgers, no onions, you know, I would do that, you know. And I think attitude might have had a lot to do with my work picking up.
Yeah, yeah. To me, it seems, looking at your career, and not necessarily knowing all of your aspirations, but looking at your career and your direction, seems to me that the sessions became more and more and more a part of your life and a part of your livelihood.
Yeah.
Because you were doing it, and I've seen your roster of TV, country music personalities that you played for. Good Lord have mercy, Barbara Mandrell, Kenny Rogers, and George, so many of them. When did you get full headlong into just concentrating on sessions?
Well, like I said, it started building in 1967, and I probably had a 77, 87. I probably had about a 30-year run at it. And boy, that's unheard of.
So that's 67 and 97.
And mainly it was because guys like Ray Eddington, who was a great rhythm player. When he couldn't do stuff, he would recommend me for it, and Harold Bradley, even Pete Wade would still recommend me for sessions, you know, and I would get to play on stuff then that I probably wouldn't have been booked on if it had not been for those peers.
Yeah.
Recommending, you
Right,
know,
right.
and that I know when we cut Easy Lovin' with Freddie Hart, I was subbing for Ray Eddington. He wanted to go fishing in Virginia, and he called me and he said, "Would you fill in for me with Freddie Hart on this album?"
How hard was this fella to catch up with after he left y'all?
Well, another aspect about the same time is doing all these sessions. When they do the specials, the award shows and everything, the Bill Walker Orchestra, they get the cream of the crop to be the band for those, and Jimmy was always in the thick of those shows too. I got a funny story about that, and I told Jimmy as late as last night. My mama was a big Jimmy Caps fan, because when we were together down in the first days, you know, he spent quite a bit of time at my mama's house. If you go to my mama's house, you're going to eat.
Yeah.
But anyhow, they wouldn't put him on camera every week, and she would tell me, "I watched the Statler Brothers show all night last night, and they never did show Jimmy." It would make her so mad.
Oh, Lord.
And this is a song that the Lumen did, one entitled, "I Can't Keep You in Love with Me."
Well, let me say this. All during that time, I never quit the Opry. I still thought the Opry, I'd have people come to visit me, and they'd say, "Can you get me in the Opry?" They never would say, "Can you get me into a session?" So I really thought the Opry had the clout, and plus all my friends were down there. And I would have guys on sessions say, on Friday afternoon, I'd say, "Guys, I got to be out of here by 5:30 because I got to be at the Opry by 6. They said, "Why do you keep doing that?" I said, "Because I love it." And I said, "All my friends are down there."
Yeah.
It's like going to a country club.
Yeah, or like going home, really.
Right, yeah. And so I never did quit the Opry. I worked it literally from 58 till today, except for 2 years in the service.
Yeah.
Billy, if I may, I want to add one thing, and you may have already talked about this, that as I think about this town, this is a great community of people here in Benson.
You bet.
I mean, to produce somebody of Jimmy's character, a lot of credit has to go not only to his family, I think, but to this people who live here. They're extraordinary people. Ray Smith became the national commander
Even
of
today.
the American Legion. I mean, Benson is a great community.
It really is.
Even today, it's a good music town. There are about 5 or 6 live music venues in Benson. You don't find that in other towns in Eastern North Carolina.
You remember when we played the Mule Day
Yeah.
program here? We had Jim Reeves, guitar player.
Leo Jackson.
What year was that? You remember?
Well, I was 17, so it was
57.
57, yeah. And we won that contest.
We won the contest.
We entered the contest, and he was with the Army band.
Yeah.
Leo Jackson had gotten drafted. He was Jim Reeves' guitar player. We later on became real good friends, but he gave us the first prize. And I think we all made, what, $10 a piece?
So. And Jerry Dunbar played the Orange Blossom Special and tuned his fiddle up in B. We played the Orange Blossom Special in B because Jerry thought it would be more dynamic.
Jimmy, we've talked about the sessions. Any session that comes to mind that stands out in your mind, it was one of the best as a musician, as a challenge, and as a good product.
Well, I'll tell you something funny that happened on a Conway Twitty session, and it's made me remember it to this day. And Conway and all of us musicians were doing a Christmas double album, and it was about Twitty City, and the Twitty bird became the Christmas item, you know, and he was doing Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. Everything was like standards in the album, you know, for the kids and stuff. And so Jimmy Bowen was the producer on it, and we were cutting it at a sound stage, I think, in Nashville. And on mic, we all had headphones on, you know, and on mic, Conway said, Bowen said, we're doing that Rudolph, and he said, I've run through it 2 or 3 times, and I said, I don't have the melody right or something. Play me that demo again. And it was Gene Autry's record. And he said, y'all forget I called Gene Autry's record a demo. He said, please forget it. And we all said, no way. This is too good a story. But I mean, a record that sold 1 jillion records, you know.
Good Lord have mercy, yeah. That thing still
and he called it a demo. Well, one time, I don't know if people remember, but Jeannie Pruitt had a big hit record on Satin Sheets.
Yeah.
Well, the intro is guitar right out in the open, no rhythm, you know. Ba da da da, ba da 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 da. Well, somebody had told me a story about Leon Rhodes, fast guitar player, that he would do a song with the Texas Troubadours, Ernest Tubb, and he would put gloves on. I said, shoot, there ain't nothing to that. Get me a pair of gloves. One of the stagehands brought me a glove, and it was one of them old leather-looking gloves, you know, work gloves.
God,
The fingers in it were 3 times the size. And I put it on, you know, and I played that intro. Well, naturally, it was awful, you know, and she just barely could come in. But the boss of the Opry, then the manager, was Hal Durham. You remember Hal? And he called me in his office on Monday morning, and he said, I want you to hear something. So he puts in a cassette, and they always tape the Opry. Well, he had one of the engineers make him a copy of it, and he said, here's my retirement. And he played me the intro, and it was awful. But that might be the most embarrassing thing.
Your new stardom.
Well, it's a new plateau for me. And I've always worked television, like Clyde was talking about, with the Bill Walker thing, and the Statler Brothers, and I used to do a show called Good Old Nashville Music.
Yeah.
That Nashville Music.
That was TNN.
TNN, and I've done a lot of television. But a guy named Larry Black and his guy that books the talent, Terry Choate, called me and he said, we need to buy you lunch, you know. I want to talk to you about something. And I had already been doing then, probably for 12 or 13 years, been doing a show called Family Reunion for Larry Black, and it was very successful, but it mainly was an infomercial. Larry sold DVDs off that show, and it paid them a lot of money and paid the band and everything. Well, then he said, we're thinking about doing a new show called Larry's Country Diner. And said, the idea we got is for you to be either the mayor or the sheriff on that show, and we'll have artists just walk in, drop by, and you can accompany them, you know. And so the catch to it is we want to do it like live to tape and not stop the tape at all, you know, and fix stuff.
Yeah.
He said, I want to do it like Johnny Carson did his show. He said he wouldn't stop. And he said, I would like to do it like that, you know. And he said, can you live with that if you want to do it, you know? And I said, well, yes, sir, I think I can, you know. I said, it'll keep you on your toes for sure, you know. So I took the show, and he said, do you want to be a sheriff or a mayor? And I said, well, I think I look more like a sheriff than I do a mayor. So I took the show, and we figured it might run just 13 shows, maybe one run.
Yeah.
Because it was such a unique idea, though. It's now been on 11 years. Clyde has done the show. Charlie's been there and been introduced on the show.
Yeah.
But Clyde played with the Malpas boys on the show.
Yeah.
And the Malpas boys told me that that once they played that show, said their mom handled all the mail outs and for their CDs and stuff. She couldn't keep up with it. They went over so well, you know.
How about that?
But the show has got a following, and we just been blessed to do that and family reunion.
Actually, I haven't got it finished, but I started writing a song about Jimmy about 10 days ago.
Wonderful.
And I've got some of it written.
Wonderful.
And the chorus goes something like this, if you'll permit me to do it, if I
Yes,
can
sir.
remember. Each one of them Nashville cats, we call him the man in back. Folks who know him say there's no one kinder. He's played the Grand Ole Opry more than 60 years. Jimmy kept that picking guitar sure for Larry's country dime.
That's good.
Jerry Medley, the mayor of Benson, and Loretta Bird, they put together I don't know what you call it. Is it a piece of granite, Jerry? Yeah. In front of this house, which I grew up in. It has my name, and words can't explain how that makes you feel. To think that someone would think that much of you, you know. And then down at the end of down at 301 down there, in the second lot from 301, it says the Jimmy Capps Parkway, honorary Jimmy Capps Parkway, and thanks to Jerry, that happened.
Yes.
And I understand that you put everything in motion, and I'm deeply grateful to you guys.
How are you doing back there? You doing good? You scared to come out here seeing all this crazy stuff back there?
Staple in that paper I didn't know about. I had to bring some cheat sheets out here with me because for the folks who watch Larry's Country Diner, you know that most of the time I'm just singing harmony with other people. So for me to be featured on a song about myself, it's really what I love to do. So I had to bring some cheat notes for me to sing my own song. Well, of course, it's not really my own song. I borrowed it.
Well, you don't make it.
I'll do it like this. Georgia mules and country boys are fading fast away.